everybody, today we're going to make the Hoop Studio Greenhouse Minis. We'll make both the wall hanging and the plant mat. In your kit you have all the fabric and embellishments you need. There's also the project batting and this great hanger. I'll have a link below for information and sign-ups for Hoop Studio. Both of these projects have 2 size options. For the Greenhouse Mini wall hanging, I'm going to make the 8x12 size today. It is also available in a 5x7 size. And our plant mat is available in 2 sizes, 5x7 and 8x12. I'm going to make the smaller plant mat today. I'm thinking the smaller size will be great for smaller potted plants and floral vases. You'll need to pull your threads. I'll be using a mixture of Floriani and Sim threads. I have them all here in my fabric wrap rope bowl. I'll link that video for you below. Looks like I actually have 1 glide thread. As we work through the project and I call out the colors, I'll refer to it as the glide color, but I will show you my color and I'll show you the color number. The Greenhouse Mini wall hanging uses a light mesh cutaway stabilizer. The plant mat uses a washaway stabilizer. For my stabilizers today, I'm using HBI brand. I've got the HBI, it's called No Show Mesh. This is extremely similar to Kimberbell's light mesh cutaway. The biggest difference is you need to be really careful with your iron when you're ironing with the stabilizer. You cannot use your iron on the highest setting, you'll melt the stabilizer. And then I also have an HBI washaway stabilizer. We're going to start today working on the Greenhouse Mini wall hanging. I already have everything cut, prepped, fusible added, ready to go. Our first step is making the hang tabs. We're going to do this on our sewing machine. You've got the 4 pieces cut to size per your instructions, whichever size project you're working on. You're going to take them, put them right sides together. You're going to have 2 tabs, and then you're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance down each side. It's going to create a tube. Then you'll flip it right side out. So pretend that that's stitched and that's looking nice and neat. And then that has you run a top stitch, which is just a straight stitch right along either edge. I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. I'll bring that back, show you what that looks like when they're sewn. Make sure when you're sewing these right sides together, go back and forth, sew your stitch, and go back and forth. That way, when you flip them right side out, they won't pull apart. Here's my tabs. You want to fold it in half, and it says you can press it. I'm just going to fold these in half, finger press it, and set it aside. They're still warm. I press them over at the iron. By the time we're ready to use these at the end, they'll be folded in half and ready to go. The next thing it tells us to do is peel the plastic away from the vinyl. I'm leaving my vinyl in the plastic until it's time to use it. Before I head over to the machine, I'm going to go ahead and hoop my light mesh cutaway stabilizer. I'll go ahead and show the hooping process. It's been a while since I showed that. That way, if we've got any beginners here, you can watch me hoop my stabilizer and see how I do that. I actually like to roll it out this way. So the roll is up here at the top. I put my hoop on top of it. I leave a little bit extra here, and then I look up here and I just leave a little bit extra. I don't measure it. So I've got, I don't know, got an inch or so there and an inch or so here past the hoop. This is nice and loose already. Let's go ahead and take that, lay that down. Kind of center it. I've got extra here and extra here and extra on both sides. I'm going to push that down. First I hand tighten, and then I go ahead and I pull it and make sure it's in there nice and tight, nice and straight, and then I screwdriver tighten. Somebody sent me this lovely embroidery hoop screwdriver. I'll look up the name again and link it below. I tend to push it really hard. I'm pushing the rubber off of it, but that's okay. It still works. The screwdriver's on the inside. Instead of using a regular screwdriver that can slip and hit my hand, I'll tighten it just about all the way, and then I'll give it another tug. Make sure that's nice and flat. That looks good. And then final tighten, and we're ready to head over to the machine. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. Let's go ahead and bring the file up. Got my Greenhouse Minis, and I'm working on the larger Greenhouse Mini, the 8x12, and when we do the plant mat, I'll do the 5x7. So let's start with our Greenhouse Mini, 8x12. Just 1 file. I'm going to hit set, and embroidery. We're good to go. Make sure you have your light mesh cutaway loaded in your hoop. We're going to start with the color Mercury. I think that's the one glide color I have for this project. I'm going to put that on my machine, and we're going to start by stitching out the base placement line. Base placement line has stitched out. We need to cover that with our project batting. Mine has a little dog hair on it, so let me pull the dog hair off. That looks better. Let's go ahead and place that right over that placement line. I'm going to add a piece of tape. It's Kimberbell paper tape. I'll make sure that's linked below in case anybody's new. We'll go ahead and slide that back on our machine, and we're going to stitch out the base tack down line. That's going to go around your base batting and hold that down. Once that's tacked down, you want to take this off your machine and trim away everything that's outside of the tack down line. I have two pairs of scissors that are my go-to for my Kimberbell projects. One is the double curve applique scissor. The other is a pair of snips. The snips I use more for trimming fabric and when I need to get into a tight corner. I'll go ahead and make sure those are linked below for you. I've got that trimmed back on my machine. We're going to stitch out the sky placement line. I'm going to pull this toward me. You're going to have a sky fabric. We're going to cover that placement line. I'm going to add a piece of tape to the top to hold it in place, and then we're going to stitch out the sky tack down line. The sky fabric is tacked down. The only thing we're going to trim right now is this little piece right here at the bottom. So don't trim the sides, don't trim the top. Just trim off this little piece here. Got that trimmed. We're going to stitch out the quilting detail. Once the quilting is stitched, you're going to stitch out a placement line for the ground fabric. Your ground fabric, and we're going to place this right side down. We're going to center the long edge along that placement line that we just stitched out. Let's center that. And I'm going to add a piece of tape at the top. You probably don't need it. I'm going to do it just in case. And then we're going to stitch the seam. The seam is stitched. It says to use a pressing cloth and press this well. I'm going to use one of my seam rollers. It's on the bed of the machine. I'm going to finger press it. And this is a Holt Seam Roller. I've had this for a while. This is a little bigger than the Clover Seam Roller that I have, the little tiny plastic one. I'm just going to roll it like this. Make sure it's nice and flat. Slide it back on the machine. And then I'm going to pull it toward me. And I'm going to add a piece of tape at the bottom just to hold it into place. Make sure it's nice and flat. Next, we're going to stitch out the ground tack down line. Once that's tacked down, you want to switch to the color Camel, and we're going to stitch out the placement line for the soil fabric. We're going to place our soil fabric, that's this one, right side up. Make sure you completely cover that placement line. I'm going to add a piece of tape, and then we're going to stitch out the soil tack down line. Tack down, trim away everything outside of the tack down line. That's trimmed, you can stitch out the satin outline and rope detail. We're going to switch to the color Spice Brown and stitch out the tree trunk fills. The instructions tell you to match your bobbin thread to your top thread. I'm not going to do that. My machine uses 90 weight bobbin thread. I don't have the bobbin case to drop in that allows you to use different weights of thread. I usually do not have an issue not changing out my bobbin thread, but if you want to follow the instructions, go ahead and wind a little bit of your Spice Brown on a bobbin, match your bobbin thread to your top thread, and then stitch out the tree trunk fills. The tree trunks are stitched, they look fine. I don't see any of my white bobbin thread at all. Go ahead and switch your bobbin thread to match if you're doing that. We're going to use coral, and we're going to stitch out the hanging pot fill. Again, I'm going to stick with my white bobbin thread, but if you're switching to match, they tell you to match your top thread to your bobbin thread. We're going to switch to the color Celery. Go back to your regular bobbin thread if you change to match. We're going to stitch out the placement lines for our trees. Grab your tree fabric. It has this as directional with the lines running up and down this way. If you cut it the wrong way, it does not matter. Don't worry about it. We're going to go ahead and place these. I've got a piece of tape at the top. We'll tack them down and then we'll trim everything outside the tack down line, just like we did with this piece of fabric here. I've got both the trees tacked down and trimmed. Let's stitch out the decorative outline. We're going to stitch out a placement line for one of the felt leaves for the potted plant on the right hand side of the design. You want to grab your felt and cover the placement line, then we're going to tack it down and trim. You could take your felt and center it, but what I'm doing is I'm placing it over to the side like this. I'm making sure I'm covering that placement line, but when I trim this, I'm going to have extra, like that much, and I can put that in my scrap pile to use on another project. See how much I'm going to have left over after I trim this? This is not going to have a decorative stitch around it, so take a little extra time, trim it up nice and neat. I've got that trimmed. Next we're going to stitch out placement lines for the 2 leaves on either side of the center leaf. I have my scrap piece here. This is where I trimmed away this leaf. This is going to fit. Look at that. I end up only needing 1 piece of felt for this. That means I have a whole extra piece of felt. I have an extra piece. We'll go ahead and stitch out the tack down and trim the 2 outside leaves. Once you've got your leaves trimmed, you can stitch out the stems details. These leaves are done. We're going to switch to the color Totem Green. I didn't really have a good match for that, but this is the closest that I have. We're going to stitch out the placement line for the leaves in the potted plant over here on the left side. We're going to be using the flocked vinyl. We have some flocked vinyl in the kit. Peel off the plastic. We want to make sure we do that before we trim these down. Here's what that looks like. It's got kind of a velvety feel to it. And I'm going to start by using this piece. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the felt for the leaves that we just completed. We'll stitch out the placement line for plant 1A, and then I'll go ahead and place it. We'll tack it down and trim, and then we're going to stitch out placement for 1B, and I'll see if I can use the same piece twice. If not, the kit does have 2 pieces large enough for this. There's our placement lines. Here's the flocked vinyl. I'm going to try and use the corner of it. I do want to make sure everything is covered. I'm going to add some tape. It's vinyl like on the back, and the top is fuzzy. You know what this makes me think of? Does anybody remember when you were little, they had those little fuzzy teddy bears? That's what this feels like. They were like an inch tall or something. That's exactly what this feels like. I'm going to add the tape, stitch the tack down, and then trim around all 3 of those leaves. I've got these trimmed. Let's stitch out our next set of placement lines. Here's the piece I just used. Easily can get everything off of just a little bit of this piece. Go ahead and make sure everything's covered. Add some tape. We'll tack down and trim, and then I'm going to have this piece left over, and this piece I didn't even peel off the plastic, so I'm ending up with some good extras from this kit. Let's go ahead, stitch the tack down and trim. All the little leaves are trimmed. We're going to stitch out the stem details. We're going to switch to Candy Apple, and we're going to stitch out the placement line for pot number 1. Pot 1 is this fabric. This is another piece of fabric I didn't trim. It says to place this with the scallops running horizontally across the hoop. The curve at the top, the point at the bottom. Do you see how small this is? It really doesn't matter. The center of this scallop has this really pretty flower. I'm going to try and center that over the pot for mine so the flower shows after it's tacked down. I'm going to fold it. I can kind of see through right about there, I think. And then I'm going to tape it, stitch out the tack down, then we'll trim it. There's my little flower in the center. I did pretty good. Once you've got that trimmed, you can go ahead and slide your hoop back on your machine, and we're going to stitch the decorative outline and rim detail. We're going to switch to the color Purple Rose and stitch out the placement line for pot number 2. This is our flower for pot number 2. It does have a print on it. It's very light. Right here, there's a flower. It's got hearts on it. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to see if I can center that. This one's a little harder to see because it's such a light color. See if I can't get that centered, and then I'll tape it. We'll tack it down, trim it, and then we'll stitch the decorative outline and rim detail. Going to switch to the color Sage, and we're going to stitch out the leaves in our hanging pot, and then there's also some leaves down here, flower 2 leaves, fills, and stems. 2 steps on the machine. I'm going to go ahead and run them together. Next, we're going to switch to Azure Blue and stitch out the flower pot fill. There's a little flower pot that's going to go right here, right under the little leaves and stems we just stitched out. We're going to switch to the color Bark and stitch out the handle and the spout fill for the watering can. Once you stitch that out, you can stitch out the placement line for the watering can. The kit has this really nice embroidery leather for the watering can. Embroidery leather is a PVC product. It is not an animal product. You can see I didn't cut my piece again. I'm going to slide it on top of that placement line, tape it into place. We'll tack it down and trim. I'm going to have a nice big piece left over of this embroidery leather. There's no decorative outline for this. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the watering can opening fill. Switch to the color Coin, and we're going to stitch out the shovel collar fill. We're going to stitch out the placement line for the shovel blade. Place our shovel leather. It's this nice silver shiny leather. I didn't trim this one either. I look at the instructions, and when we have an embellishment kit, if something is only used once, usually I don't trim it, and then I do what I'm doing now where I try to place it so I have minimal use and I get a nice big fat piece left over for my scrap pile. Let's go ahead, tack this down, and trim it. There will be no decorative stitching. I've got that trimmed. We're going to switch to the color Coffee. We're going to stitch out the handle for the shovel and some stones along the ground. The stones are going to be inside the little fabric detail. Next, we're going to switch to Candy Apple, and we're going to stitch out the flower 2 petals fill. We're going to switch to the color Starlight and stitch out the greenhouse frame detail. So it's the whole thing that makes it look like a greenhouse. If you haven't changed your bobbin recently, check your bobbin. It would be kind of a bummer for your bobbin to run out during this and have any of the stitches look weird. We're going to switch to Totem Green and stitch out the placement line for the 2 bushes. These are going to be made with the flocked vinyl. Here's that piece that I have left. I cut off a little piece that had the cutouts. Look at that. I can get both of these bushes out of this piece. I'm going to lay it down. I've got the top covered. Where's the bottom of the bush? Right there. Got to fold it. I'm going to trim it on that fold. That'll be big enough for that piece, hopefully. Hopefully I didn't just cut it too small. Easily. And then this piece I'll lay down for the other bush over here. I don't have to worry about trimming. Just make sure I cover the placement line. I'll tape them both into place, tack down, and then trim. There's no decorative stitching outside of these. Look at this. I still had a piece left over. So if you're careful with your flocked vinyl, you only need one piece and you can get all the little leaves and the bushes out of that. Next, we're going to switch to Baby Blue, and we're going to stitch out flowers 1 and 3 petals fill. The next thing we're going to stitch out is in the color Bone, and we're going to stitch out the flower centers fill. We are all done at the machine. Let's take this over to the table, get it out of the hoop, and finish our project. Before I take it out of the hoop, I'm going to trim the jump threads. I've got some between the flowers, just a couple, and one or two between some of these little stones. Once you have any jump threads trimmed, you've got this out of your hoop. We're going to trim our project. We're going to trim right along the line going around our project. It's the sky and ground tack down lines. Got a ruler here. We've got nice straight lines to follow. I'm going to line my ruler up on this line on the side, and then I'm going to find a line on my ruler and line it up with this line of stitching. It's a way to double check to make sure you've got both of those lines lined up nice and straight. We've got 4 border strips. In the instructions, when you cut these, it said to cut 2 1 by 8 1/4 and 2 1 by 8 1/2. I cut them all by 8 1/2. I made it easy on myself. We're going to start attaching our borders on the sides. So you'll see mine are just a little bit longer, so I'll trim them after I attach them. What I'm going to do is line them up. You can pin or clip. Then you'll go to the sewing machine, sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and press, and we'll press it out toward the side borders. Be careful when you're doing your pressing. I would press from the back because you've got this embroidery leather here, and you've got this flocked vinyl. If you press anything from the front, cover it with a pressing cloth. I'm going to attach the 2 side borders, and I'll bring it back and show you what it looks like. Here's my side borders, and I pressed out toward the side borders. I have to even them up because my border strips are a little bit long. I'm going to take my ruler, line up a line on the ruler with the seam I just sewed, and find the top line right there, and then cut off the little bit extra, and then I'll do the same thing for the little bit extra on the bottom. Now I have to attach the top and the bottom borders. I'm going to do the same thing, wrong size down. This will be close to an exact fit. Looks like I still will have a little bit extra to trim off, which is nice. So I'll do top and bottom, press them out, and I'll bring that back and show you what it looks like. Here's what this looks like so far. There are measurements in the instructions if you want to see if your measurements match. At this point, it really doesn't matter. Here's our backing fabric. This does have fusible on it. It did say in the instructions to add the fusible. You're going to place it right side down. So fusible side up. And you're going to put your project on top of the backing fabric like that, and then you're going to want to trim it to match. So however much you have extra, just go around, line up your ruler, feel for the side of your project, trim the extra off, and go all the way around and do that. As you're trimming, if you want, you can grab some clips and hold it in place to keep it from shifting. I've got that trimmed. I'm going to add a few more clips to it to hold it in place. We're going to flip it around to the back, and we're going to figure out where we need to attach our tabs. If you go to your instructions on page 8, there's a diagram here. Depending on if you're doing the 8 by 12 or the 5 by 7, you'll have a different measurement for your tabs. I'm doing the 8 by 12 today, so I'm going to be calling out these measurements. If you're doing the 5 by 7, go to page 8. Check the diagram. It says to measure at 1.5 and 3, 1.5 and 3. I'm measuring at 3. That's really the only measurement I need. And I'm actually going to grab my washable marker. These come in Kimberbell punch needle kits or clear blue tiles, or you can just buy, they call them water soluble pens. It's more like a marker. I'm going to just make a tiny mark right there so I know where the 3 is. Slide this clip back on. Move those. Let's measure the next one. 1, 2, 3. Right there. And that's going to be the inside markers for our tabs. This tab is going to go right here, and it's open edge at the top. And I'm actually going to line it up a little bit over that water-soluble pen so I don't have to go back and get my project wet. It'll get caught underneath the tab and underneath my binding when I sew it together. I'm going to clip it. I'm going to grab the next one, cut off the stray thread, find my mark, a little bit underneath like that, so you never know it's there, unless of course you're watching the video. Clip it, and then you can double check and measure this part right here. That way if your tabs are uneven, you can make any adjustments you need. At this point, it tells you to go over to your sewing machine and to sew these down with 1/8 of an inch before you put on your binding. I'm going to leave them clipped. I'm going to put on my binding, and as I go around and do my binding, I'm going to catch these in the binding. I'm going to do the binding off camera. If you've never done quilt binding before, I'm going to link a video below for you where I go step by step showing how to add binding to a quilt. I do machine binding. I've got the binding on. I ironed these up. I probably need to iron them a little more or set them under my clapper. Let's go ahead and put it on the display. Just kind of wiggle it and pull it, and the dowel comes off. Put the dowel through your hang tabs, and then we'll go ahead and slide it back on. Looks good. Let's flip it over. Very cute. This came out really nice. Really nice with the felt and the flocked vinyl that feels like those little teddy bears from the 80s. Really cute. Here's your hanger. I can't get it all on the screen going the other direction, but that came out really nice. This was a fun project. There's a lot involved with the applique. We're going to move on to the next project. We're going to stitch out the plant mat. For the plant mat, you need wash away stabilizer. The clear vinyl is included in the kit. I'm going to go ahead and load my wash away stabilizer. I load it the same way I load the other stabilizer, only I don't pull it quite so hard. Let's go ahead and load our file for our plant mat. I'll have details about my folding metal book stand and the home sewn needle minder in the description box below the video. I'll be making the 5x7 plant mat. Get that loaded. We only need 2 colors of thread for this one, linen and peach. The instructions do have us matching the bobbin thread for these. I'll call that out, but I am not going to do that. I'm going to use my white bobbin thread throughout. We're going to start with the color linen on our machines. We're going to stitch out the base placement line. You want to grab your base project batting. Make sure you cover your placement line. I'm going to add a piece of tape. We'll stitch the tack down and trim everything away outside of the tack down line. Next, we're going to stitch out the outer circle placement line. Once that's stitched out, grab your outer circle fabric. Make sure to cover the placement line. I've got a piece of tape at the top. Stitch the tack down and then trim. Next, we're going to stitch out the inner circle fabric placement line. Grab your inner circle fabric. This should have fusible on the back. Cover that placement line. We'll stitch the tack down and then trim. Next, we're going to stitch out the quilting detail. Next, you want to stitch out the inner circle satin outline. You're going to want to grab your clear vinyl. I trimmed this, but I left it in the plastic so nothing would get on it, so I need to peel away the plastic. I held it up to the window. I didn't see anything. I cleaned the underside. Not as worried about the top because we can clean the top after we're done with our project. And we want to tape this, and you want to tape it securely all the way around. I've got my tape going all the way around. We're going to stitch the inner circle tack down line. That's all stitched out. You can remove your tape and trim away the vinyl that's outside of the tack down line. There's no decorative stitching, so take your time, trim carefully, trim close to the stitches, but don't trim too close. You want to make sure that it stays tacked down. I've got my vinyl trimmed. For the next step, it tells you to match your bobbin thread to your top thread. I'm leaving my white thread on my bobbin. We've got linen for the top thread. If you want, put some linen on your bobbin. We're going to stitch out the border lace scallops details. There's more stitching to the border lace scallops detail. It looks like it's actually 2 steps. My machine went all the way around and did the little loops, and then it stopped. It made the noise that it was done. So your border lace scallops details might be 2 steps on your machine. The border lace scallop is all stitched out. All my thread breaks were kind of at the beginning. It went almost all the way around from about here all the way across the top and down until it finished with no problems. If you changed your bobbin thread to match the top thread, you want to go ahead and change it back to a neutral color. We're going to stitch the words flourish, grow, and bloom. Each word is going to stitch out 3 times. I have another thread break there. That's okay. All the words have stitched out. We're going to flip our hoops to the back, and you're going to want to grab your back fabric. You're going to take your back fabric and make sure to cover your project. Right side up. It should cover the whole project. It does say cover the outer circle placement line, but mine covers the whole entire project. And you want to make sure to support the bottom. Don't push hard on that. We're going to tape this down all the way around. Now all the tape is in place, I'm going to put my hand underneath to support the stabilizer and press that down. You want to make sure it's going to be nice and secure, so you don't want that to happen when you put this on your machine and get your tape all gummed up in your machine. So make sure this tape is nice and secure. And then we're going to put it back on our machine, and we're going to stitch out the back fabric tack down. And we are going to change thread colors for that. And if you're matching your bobbin thread, you'll be matching your bobbin thread. Make sure this is nice and pressed down. I've got that taped into place. You can actually see it really easily from the front. You'll know if it's not in the right spot. We're switching to the color peach. This is the color that I'm using for peach. Match your bobbin thread if you want. We're going to stitch the back fabric tack down line. Once you've got that tacked down, you can pull this off your machine, flip it to the back. You'll remove all of the tape and then trim away everything outside of this tack down line. Here's the back, it's all trimmed. Go ahead and flip it back to the front side. We're going to put it on our machine, and we're going to stitch the final satin outline. It does say to match your bobbin to your top thread. I'm using the white thread. I'm okay with that. Let's go ahead and stitch the satin outline. We are all done at the machine. What you want to do now is take this out of the hoop, trim away the excess stabilizer. Be careful, do not trim your stitching, so you'll have a little bit of extra stabilizer. Then you can either use a sponge brush to dissolve the extra, or if you want, you can submerge the whole thing in water. That will dissolve the water-soluble stabilizer. You want to lay that flat to dry. If you've changed your bobbin thread to match your top thread, make sure to put your regular bobbin thread back on your machine. I went ahead and ran this under the faucet. I did put a bowl underneath. The water-soluble stabilizer can be a bit sticky, so you don't want it going down your pipes, especially if you're on septic. You can see that it's still wet. It's hot out, but it's cloudy and humid today here in Arizona, so it's wet here. It's wet for the end of the video, but I'll put up a picture and show you what it looks like dry. I managed to get everything on screen. Thank you so much for stitching out the Hoop Studio Greenhouse Minis with me. Please be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends. There's a link below for Hoop Studio and Kimberbell products. If you decide to sign up for Hoop Studio or purchase any products after watching one of my videos, I'd greatly appreciate it if you would use the link below, and thank you to everyone who does use the links. I get a small commission, but more important, it lets Kimberbell know that people are watching my videos. I'll have more Kimberbell fun coming your way soon. Thank you for watching. Bye, everybody!